Morning, Amanda Lord from Patient 360. Thanks so much for joining us today. Getting through some housekeeping items as we begin to get started. Just want to make sure that you can hear me loud and clear. Tamara, everything A-okay with sound? Can you hear?
It sounds good, Amanda.
Awesome. Okay, great. And I'll go ahead and take the ball so we can get started on our presentation.
It is heading. Should head now.
Awesome. I should be able to see the screen of our session. Everything clear for you, Tamara?
It looks
awesome. So we're going to get started today. I know there's still some folks stressed, but we can appreciate the fact that the hour for those of you on the East Coast is probably pretty short. So we want to get through as much material as we can for you, but also leave the opportunity for a lot of questions and answers, because we do know that the ever-changing rules of Medicare and what's going on with CMS in this program is very complex. And so try to keep a lot of humor. We'll try to make some of this a little for you, because I try to laugh as much as I can when it comes to the ever-evolving program that we're talking about here, which is MIPS. Today, focus mostly on the 90-day reporting period and what it really means and what you need to do to be successful in the 90 days. But for that, just a couple of housekeeping items. Just letting you know, Team P360, there's various members on the call today that are going to be talking to you about different aspects of the 90-day reporting period. So we've got myself, I'm Amanda Lord, and I talk to you about the program rules and policies throughout. So I'll be peppered in, kind of chiming in with what the program rules are and how to follow those under the spirit of the program. We've got Doug Jorgensen. Dr. Jorgensen is going to talk to us about midway through about some of the 90-day reporting rules, and from the clinical perspective, what you should be focusing on, what's important to think about clinically as you're selecting measures within the 90-day. And then at the end, we've got our lead developer with us, Ray D'Onofrio, and he's going to be talking to you more about things to expect in the Patient 360 portal with the new user interface. So some exciting acts of development that we've been going through for users to make things easier, to make the process simpler for data transmission. So we're pretty excited about that. Now, we've got on call today some clients who are currently with us. Welcome back. So you're here to learn about how to go ahead and report most successfully in the 90 days. And then we've got folks with us that probably are new to the whole MIPS thing and want to learn a bit more about it and a bit more about Patient 360. So we'll make sure we speak to audiences so that you come off the call knowing what's going on. Another quick housekeeping item: if you do have any questions, type them into the chat box to Patient 360, and as we are going through, Tamara will let us know the questions and we'll try to weave them into the session. If we don't get to them during the session while we're speaking on various topics, we'll address them at the end. And if we run into time, we always email answers to your questions within about 24 to 48 hours. So your questions will be answered. So again, just type those into the chat box so we can make sure that we go through all of those strategically and in order so that we can address everything. Today's agenda, and I'm going to pause for a moment, again, one more time before we really dig into stuff to make sure everything's coming out loud and clear and that the screen that you see it, and also to let everyone know that Patient 360 is recording this session. For those of you that may have to drop off early, you have other obligations, you will access this recorded. Give it a few days. It usually takes some time to edit through it and get the session up and running for you recorded, but we will have a copy of this. So just want to make sure that that's all set and recording fine, and that everyone can still see the screen and hear me clearly.
Amanda, we can see it well.
Great. So today's agenda, what we're first going to go through, and most of you may or may not know, so we'll try to touch briefly on everything, are the actual reporting options under the Quality Payment Program. Know what the options are, and you have a big picture on those options. And then we're going to spend the most time, the bulk of our time, on the requirements for actual 90-day reporting and what the mechanics of that, what's required within 90-day reporting, what you need to think about in order to follow the rules of the program, but also from a clinical perspective, what makes the most sense to think about as well. And then, of course, we always touch upon, we weave upon the spirit of the program throughout. And let me comment on that briefly before we get into the session when we say spirit of the program. you are fine, just as we do as a registry. We're all growing with this program. So this program is live. It's a living, breathing program. There are days that it drives us bonkers as well because CMS is constantly changing the rules for it. They're evolving the program. They launched the program prior to having lots of different things prepared. They even have the API for registries to be able to utilize yet. That actually didn't come out until June. They didn't approve all of the measures until much later in the season. So you'll notice lag. There's often a lag of information that we receive from the government. Big surprise, right? So what we try to do as a registry and as a QCDR, what we best try to do is uphold the spirit of the program as much as we can, but also we're realists and we're trying to work with you as the providers, because my partner and co-founder of Patient 360, Dr. Jorgensen, who's on the call, he'll be talking in a little while, he recognizes how frustrating this can be from the provider angle and from the provider side of things. So we try as a registry and a QCDR to find that balance for you, to show you how to do to uphold the spirit of the program and not overuse or abuse the sort of gamesmanship, if you will, that's involved, because there is gamesmanship in these types of programs. There's always going to be, especially when money is tied to it. But we try to balance that with you as a registry and talk to you about what are the rules, what expectations, but then also what's going to be most helpful to you as a provider so that you can actually impact change and make clinical quality changes to the outcomes with your patients, because that's really at the end game. It is the spirit of the program, is to impact changes and outcomes. And so we really do try to think about that with you as your QCDR and as your registry. So that's what we're going to be going through today, and just wanted you to keep in mind as you're thinking about the MIPS program overall. And sometimes you might be ripping your hair out of your head because it's driving you crazy. We as your registry and QCDR are on your side, and we're working as much as we can with you to help you understand the program, the rules and the policies, how they best apply to you so that you can actually make changes in your clinical quality of care. Just so everybody is positioned with what's going on here in 2017 under the new MIPS program, there's 3 different options for you to report. And when I say options, I mean if you choose registry or QCDR, which most of you probably are going in that direction since you're on this call, there's 3 paces at which you can submit your data to CMS. And the first one is the test pace. Most of you on this call probably aren't going to be utilizing the test pace because you're for the 90-day. You want to learn more about the 90-day. But we're letting you know if you're a beginner, if you're a solo provider, if you've done this before and you actually just don't have time this year to deal with the full program rules that we're going to go into for 90-day and full year, you do still have the option to do the test pace. It's called our MIPS for Beginner, M4B. If you're on our website, which is patient360.com, you can click right there and register for it. It's very simple. The requirements for that are literally 1 patient and 1 measure. We encourage you to report up to 20 encounters simply to be a part of the benchmark, as does CMS. You don't have to. The requirement is just pick 1 measure across one of the categories. So if you're a solo provider on this call right now, or if you're someone, this applies to you, that's never explored this program before, you're a little bit confused, you don't really know what to do, and you don't have a lot of time to spend on this, you don't have staff in your office, maybe not so many resources, still using paper, you may want to look at the test pace or MIPS for Beginners option on our website. So have a look at that when you have a moment. If who I am describing is you, solo provider, into the scene, really have a lot of time to spend on this. For those of you that are a bit more seasoned, that's what we're going to be talking today, which is the 90-day, also the full year at this point. Because if you're trying to do the full year and you're not already with us and haven't started entering data, you'll probably have to go back retroactively and start entering a lot of data, which is a bit time consuming. You still can be done, but for most of you at this point that are on this call, because we're approaching the 90-day deadline, and we'll explain to you, that'll be forthcoming with a little calendar to make that a little bit clearer to you. What does that really mean, the 90-day deadline? But for most of you on this call, this is most applicable. You've already participated in the sunsetted or the previous program called PQRS. You kind of have a sense of what measures are. When I say this is a quality measure, it's ring a bell. So you know a bit about this. You're more informed about the program. That's when you're going to want to look at the 90-day program option, which is required 6 quality measures. You have 50% of all of your patients, and you have to capture data for 90 days. When we say 6 measures, it's also important that you're aware for the 90-day pace. Now under the MIPS category, and I don't want to blow anyone's mind for those of you that don't know this, but it's an important thing to bring a picture, is that no longer a value-based modifier, that it's separated anymore. So previously in the old PQRS program, there were many different clusters of programs that were separated out. They're all what I say, they're married. They're married into one program called the MIPS program. There's a few different categories within the MIPS program. So you've got quality category, which is the old PQRS measures. You have your ACI, that's what used to be meaningful use. Okay, you have your improvement activities, which is a new category, and cost, which is not going to count for 2017. So I don't want you to worry yourself about it right now, but it's something to keep on the radar. So the categories within this program. So your report, if you're doing 90 days on your 6 quality measures, that's one category. You also have to do the ACI and the IA category. Much easier to do, really requires just a few ticking of boxes. We're going to do a lot more today into the quality portion of the 3 categories that you need to submit on for the 90-day, because honestly, the ACI and the IA process is fairly simple. It's much simpler, so we want to spend more time on the quality process because it's worth more percentage-wise, and because it takes a bit more time to select your 6 quality measures. Whereas for ACI, category, and IA, it's a much simpler process. So you know that that's what we're going to be focusing on today, but also important for you to be aware of those requirements, that if you're doing the 90-day, which is here in the middle, your 6 quality measures, 50% of your patients, and 90 days of data capture, you will also be doing these 6 measures in conjunction with submitting your ACI and your IA categories. But don't panic about those. They're much, much simpler than doing the quality category. And so that's why we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the quality category today. Spend a lot of time right now going through full year. Understand it's the same as 90-day, except that you have to be putting encounters in for the entire year of reporting. And that's going to get your bonus higher. So for those of you that still think, hey, look, I'm willing to go back retroactively and start submitting data since January 1st, we can work with you that. It's going to take a little bit more time, but we can have a sidebar conversation about that. If it's something that you're still thinking about doing with us, shoot me an email and we'll be set up with doing the full year reporting. But today, let's focus on that 90 days. I'm going to talk to us a little bit now about the 90 days reporting, what that really means from a clinical perspective, thinking about that chunk of 90 days that you want to look at, and the deadlines. So the deadline from CMS is early October. It's October 1st, and he's going to talk to you a little bit more about that from the clinical perspective.
Great. Morning to everyone out there. Sorry, it's afternoon here, not necessarily where everybody else is. I wanted to thank you guys for joining us. Excited to be doing this. The 90-day reporting is actually a very interesting component, and if people are using or participating in the quality program since its inception, there were temporal reporting periods that were used in the early part of the PQRS program. And the intention at that time was to do consecutive days so that they could make sure we weren't cherry picking or picking different patients. And so you had to report 20 patients all in a row who, let's say, had diabetes, and report on all the measures that were related to them, so that if you had a bunch of patients that were not doing well, if you got them all in a row, you could potentially have a bad set of data that you would have to report. That's really not what the intent is within this particular program. The 90-day reporting period is to take a chunk of time out of the system that will be representative of your data set, and it will allow you to report those 90 days. Now, you can choose your best 90 days if you wanted to do longer than 90 days. If you just want to be done with the damn program and have to continue to deal with this crap, because that's what it feels like some days when you're trying to take care of patients, you can just say, I'm going to start reporting on day 1, and then on day 90, the program will be over. Now, what's confusing some folks, and they ask us these questions, is well, what if I start reporting on, let's say, next Monday, the 28th of August, but my first patient doesn't show up right away? What really becomes confusing is that patient might not show up who has a measure that you're reporting on for 2 or 3 days. That's fine. All you have to do is say, these are my 90-day reporting period, and you're going to have different numbers of patients and different measures populated based upon how those people roll in over those 90 days. You will be penalized for that. It's not problematic. It's how the program works. And you don't want to have different, nor do they want you to have different 90-day reporting periods for each measure. So it's a flat 90 days, and many patients come in during that program would be participating. So you're looking at how this program really it's kind of stacked up. And I like the 5K, 10K marathon, triathlon example here, except I don't really like to run. I'm more an elliptical kind of guy. So if we look at MIPS for beginners, or M for B as we call it, that's kind of like your 5K. You just start participating. You're getting out there. You can walk. You can run, however you do it, but it's short, and you'll be done with it rather immediately. It's one measure, one patient, and you will avoid penalty. The reporting makes you eligible for bonus, and it requires you to report for 90 consecutive days. So obviously, the drop dead date for that is the beginning of October, or you run out of 90 days in the 2017 reporting period. And what you want to be able to do is perform the best that you can in that period. Now, the problem is if you wait until that period of time, those are the only 90 days you have, unless you try to go back and retroactively report. So we recommend people always starting as early as possible, but being a physician myself, procrastination tends to be the name of the game. There's a lot of competing priorities, so sometimes it's just difficult to do. The marathon is the full year of reporting, and we say that only because it requires you to participate from the beginning. Now, that being said, there are measures that you can go back and do that are just part of your daily work. For instance, I had a group yesterday I was talking to their nurses who do orthopedics, and they wanted to be able to report in the IA and the ACI categories about prescription monitoring program. And the prescription monitoring program looks at how many controlled substances you're writing, and many states now have this part of their opiate rules that you have to identify this before you write a controlled substance prescription. When it occurs, you get credit for that under the improvement activities. And as long as you are participating, like our state requires you check it at least quarterly, you will see the requirements of the improvement activity requirements. So there are lots of things that will happen simultaneously or that you're already doing for another program or requirement that you can use. It's a matter of being smart about how you're doing it. Amanda talked about knowing the rules of the game, and that's something we've said in the billing coding world for years. If you understand the rules of the game, then you can learn how to win the game by being smarter, not necessarily working harder. Because to be blunt, this is a pain in the ass. Nobody has time to really do it. Nobody really wants to do it, except that we know in the end it should improve quality and decrease cost to our patients and to the system. But right now that burden is on our backs. So the benefit is that you'll be able to hopefully get better bonused, and you'll be able to be leading the pack in what you're doing, which brings me to the Quality Clinical Data Registry, or Patient 360's QCDR. QCDR, we actually wrote metrics that we thought were not available. Medicare agreed with us, and they approved our metrics, and to actually use metrics that the rest of the MIPS folks can't use unless they're working with Patient 360. Our metrics are specifically focused on manual medicine, musculoskeletal medicine, pain management, and all of the regulatory work that goes into pain management, looking at your drug screens for both addiction recovery and pain practices. The reason we're calling this more of a triathlon is as measures come out of the QCDR, they have to be vetted, and there's a point system. Amanda and I are working on an article right now for the American Academy of Professional Coders that will be coming out in the fourth quarter that will kind of get to this in great detail, because when we kind of understand what the rules are and we talk about it, but then when we talk to somebody else and she and I are not and go, yeah, and we just add in this or that, and as you know, the federal world's filled with acronyms, other people are like, I have no idea what the hell you're talking about. So what we're trying to do is make this more clear. Well, in the QCDR world, measures that are not weighted or have not been vetted yet are worth less points, in a nutshell. These measures, which are the other 240 few quality measures, are worth 10 points. So our goal is to identify as many points for our clients to help you get above the report threshold that will make you eligible for the highest level bonus. And because you only have to report on 51% of your patients, meaning more than 50% of the patients in the practice, you become eligible to not have to report on everybody. So although cherry picking is in the spirit of the program, as Amanda mentioned and as Medicare loves to say, will help you be able to do better by cherry picking and identifying the best patients to be reporting during that 90-day period. Because although we want you to report everybody who comes in, you only have to report on 51% of the people that come in during that 90-day period, or 51% of the people if you're going to report year-round. So,
that's right. Doug. And another quick comment on all of these categories, folks, just to make you all aware, regardless of which one you participate in, just by participating, and this is a good thing this year, getting rid of this in 2018, the beginner and the 90-day. In 2018, on the proposed final rule, which is going to come out in the fall, but what they've proposed is that everybody's got to do full year for 2018. But for this year, if you do any of these, you're going to avoid the negative 4% payment adjustment regardless of which category, of which PACE you choose. Now choosing to do one of these three, that opt you in for a potential bonus. So what Doug is talking about is if you select one of these three and pick measures that are worth a lot of points and you score well, the more points you get, the more opportunity you have to get a bonus beyond avoiding the negative 4% payment adjustment. So people are used to the program just avoiding a negative penalty. Just by participating with us, you're going to avoid the negative penalty. Now what we're trying to talk about today and help you understand today is what is it that you need to do or how to participate in order to actually potentially gain a bonus on top of avoiding that penalty.
That's not picking up.
No.
So what we want to try to do is identify the start date, and that really means preparing your team. My folks who've done the quality reporting at my office, as I come around, they start to scamper if we're starting to discuss this. Not because it's hard to do, but it's tedious. And what you want to do, though, is help them understand how this is going to help the practice, how it's going to improve patient care, how it's going to potentially improve the fiscal elements. And they're usually able to join that and say, okay, let me look at my workflow. So we use our medical assistants and our nurses because they're the ones that are kind of identifying and accessing the data from those patients so they can begin to collect the data in real time. And it will sometimes just simply change how we're doing our intake process. So once you have that date picked, everybody is on board, then you have measure selection. Now, we also talk to folks within the categories that we need to look at for our type of practice. I have a pain, interventional, musculoskeletal, manipulative medicine practice, and do things from opiates to therapy, regenerative medicine, PRP, and interventional spine work. So there's a broad breadth of what we're doing. We actually identify just 2 of our providers who will report on greater than 50% of our patients that they see so that everybody in the practice can benefit. We'll get into that a little bit later. It's not the focus of today's program. But we're able to then pick our categories in quality ACI and IA so that we know precisely what we're doing. We also happen to be in a rural setting, so I have to report on improvement activity as opposed to 2 if you're not. So it's little nuances that really make a difference in how you're choosing what you're choosing to do. Now that we've selected those, we have our start date. We will then went through and said, okay, let's identify patients as they come through the system. Now, just because we've identified every single patient does not mean we're necessarily going to use them. I'll give you a diabetes example. If you have somebody coming through that is a hemoglobin A1C that's 11, and you've got more patients that are coming through that are in the 6 range, clearly the 6 is going to be better than the 11 because no one will syrup running through their veins, and those people are going to really injure your overall report data. So we want to try to get as many patients who are compliant. Now, I've had people say, well, that seems unfair because it's not representative. Unfair or not, what the rules state is that you have to report on greater than 51% of the patients, and it doesn't tell you which 49% you remove. So that becomes really important. So as you move this first, second, and third decision-making process, you want to help your team also understand why you're doing it, when you were doing it, what you selected, what measures are there. And honestly, sometimes the staff are really helpful in saying that's going to be easier for us to collect, and I think we can do on that, and explain when you pick the patients, flag the ones that you think are going to be problematic because they may not be ones that you want to be reporting on. And that's just an important element to understand how this whole gaming process moves forward. So let me take a here when you're picking the start date. The thing to bear in mind is as you head into December and November, number one, they're crazy times of year because it's the holidays. You got 31 days in December, 30 days in November, so that's 61, which means you have until the 2nd of October to report if you're going to do the 90-day period. So we really don't have a lot of time to get rolling here because that's going to come around pretty darn quickly because Labor Day is not this coming weekend, but the one after.
We wanted to help you avoid, right, Doug, the whole what will happen is, and we foresee this, and that's why we're reaching out to everybody now about the 90 days, is it's not that you can't decide to start reporting in our portal after October 1st, right? You can, but you have to go retroactively back in and pull encounters and dates of service prior to October 1st in order to meet that 90-day threshold requirement. And so it's painful to do that than it is to just say, okay, today, August 23rd, 24th, I'm going to start entering data into the Patient 360 portal today on August 24th. Great. And it's going to stop me in 90 days, and I'm going to look at that 90 days worth of data. So if you're starting it now, then you can enter data weekly utilizing either our templates, or we can talk to you about get data. You can enter it directly into our portal. So there's a number of different ways to do it. But if you're doing it now, as opposed to waiting until November to then go back in and pull data from back in October, it's a much more efficient way of looking at the process.
I'd add one more with that, Amanda. What I think is important to understand, people in medicine are super, super busy. So because we're in the process of taking care of people's lives every day, this type of record keeping can get pushed to the side. And I often, have joked, and there's also very dark humor, but I'm worried about, did I do something that's going to kill somebody than if I screwed up on my data submission? That being said, this is super important. We're being paid a 2002 fee schedule. If you don't get bonused, your whole practice is getting paid at a fee schedule that was designed for 50 years ago. So it's that much more important that we are getting this data in and that we are helping people be successful. And the other thing that happens, and I mentioned procrastination earlier, because holidays come, because New Year's is coming, because we have a lot of things going on, our busiest time for both signing people up, scrambling to get data, is the end of the fourth quarter and the beginning of the first quarter, because those are the times that people say, holy crap, I didn't do this and I've got to get on board. So we really want to help you be proactive.
And to your point, Doug, being proactive, it's not only avoid scrambling around the holidays and everything, but if we go back to the spirit of the program, if you start now, right, you can submit for longer than 90 days and then pick your best 90 days. So that actually gives you the opportunity, back to the spirit of the program, of actually improving outcomes and looking at improved quality of care. If you're proactively going back in and just pulling data, there is an opportunity to make improvement in what you're actually doing. So the whole idea is report a year or as early as you can, so that if the first month that you're doing it, you're noticing for a particular measure, oh, like these encounters are terrible, what's going on here with this particular program? Overall, with these 3 providers that have been utilizing this measure, like what's happening here clinically that we might be able to tweak, either during it or something that's going on, so we can make improvements in the performance. And then we don't have to bother reporting on this first 30 days that really sucked, because we knew what we were doing wrong, we fixed it. Now all the other encounters that are going in thereafter, they're looking much better for our performance. So that's another thing to think about your approach to program, especially if it's newer to you. You have time to make those clinical adjustments. And oftentimes we get questions all throughout the reporting year that, hey, I'm doing this clinic, what could I be doing for this? Is this okay to do? Can we utilize it this way? Can we look at it that way? And oftentimes some of the adjustments that are made actually allow you to meet the performance more often on the measure that you're looking at, which is really important, and then you submit that data. So that's just something else to think about. Before we shift over into talking of picking the measures, and Doug and I will both talk about that with you together, does anybody have any questions that they want to pop into the chat box related to the 90 days itself, or anything related to clinical, thinking about it from a clinical perspective that you have for Doug? I'm just going to, because I know we've been filling your head with a lot and we're talking real fast. So, Tamara, if not any questions, I'm going to continue on.
You've been able to answer the couple that have come in so far.
Great. So in terms of picking measures for the 90-day PACE, everyone, we wanted to lay this out for you quickly. I talked about it in the beginning, but now you can actually see it. You have to choose measures if you're choosing the 90 days and you want to get a bonus. So if you're towards potential bonus, you have to choose measures across each of the 3 categories, which would be measures. Those are the ones that used to be PQRS, and that's what we're spending the most of the time on today, because it's the most on your final score in terms of points and percentages. the most, and it's a bit more complex because there's a lot more measures to choose from, and the data you're required to enter is a little bit more robust. Advancing care information and improvement activities, much easier, not worth as much in terms of percentage. And so that you kind of, if you're participating in meaningful use, which most of you have over time, the ACI category is going to be pretty easy for you. Also have a designated area in our portal for those of you that are not CERT or that are not on an EMR. And we do work with a number of providers that are still on paper or what, and you're not using an EMR. There is a special hardship exemption that you can apply for with CMS. That's actually out now. If you don't link to it or you don't know what that is and you need more information on it, just pop your name into the chat box and just say hardship exemption details, please. We'll forward you the link to go ahead and apply for the hardship exemption if you're not on an EMR, because that's something that you're going to want to think about. What happens with the hardship exemption? That you actually don't have to submit details for the ACI category, obviously, because you're not on an EMR, but then they re-weight. So they'll re-weight that category over to the quality category if you fulfill hardship requirements, which means that you're not actually losing points and you still have a potential for some sort of bonus. So that's something to think about if you're not on an EMR. To work with Patient 360 as a QCDR, so what Doug was talking about here, and you're thinking, you know what all the MIPS quality measures are, but I'd really like to take a look at Patient 360's sort of home measures, what they've come up with. Those might be more applicable to me. They might be more useful. You can actually mix and match. So you don't have to use for all 6 of these quality measures here in the category. So you have to pick all 6 of our Patient 360 QCDR measures. You might choose typical measures that people choose all the time for quality, like MedRec, measure number 46, diabetes, hemoglobin A1C, number 1. They're really common. There's a lot of common measures that are used over and over again, year after year, regardless of specialty, because so many people, it's like a universal measure. So you may do a few of those that you know you can perform well on, get lots of points, and then mix and match and do a couple of our QCD measures as well. So if that's something of interest to you and you haven't really thought yet about, well, QCDR, I haven't even thought about that. I strongly encourage you to take a look at our website, because the QCDR measures that we've developed are actually listed there, so you can take a look at what are they asking for, what do you need to do to meet the performance for those particular measures. So if you're doing the 90-day PACE option, that's what we're talking about today, for a chunk of 90 days, or so you might say, I want to report for 110 days, but I only want to submit 90 days. That's okay to do, to submit best 90 days. In doing so, however, it's important for you to make sure that you're reporting across each of the categories. All 3 of these categories are in our portal, so you'll be able to click in each section and report on each one of the categories. And there's buttons that you click on that tell you, yes, no, answer this question. For the AI for improvement activities, like I said, usually it's just an attestation. It's, yes, I did this, no, I didn't do this, and it asks you for the particular dates. Occasionally, there's a numerator and denominator for ACI, but it's pretty easy. It's like number of patients over number of instances. That's it. You're putting in 2 numbers, and it gives you the performance rate. So these 2 categories are fairly easy, and you move through them pretty quickly. What's required for ACI are the base measures, and our portal already designates which ones those are for you based on which EMR version you're on. So if you're on 2015, it spits out what the base measures are for you. And if you're on 2014 EMR, it spits out what the ACI transition base measures are for you and lets you know what you have to report on. So there's some aspects to that as well. So again, 3 categories to report for 90-day option, the quality measure category being the most complex and the most robust and worth the most points at the end that you can get towards bonus. You can do a combination of QCD measures if that's of interest and mix and match those with the regular MIPS measures, or you can just submit all 6 MIPS regular measures, and we'll show you at the end of the presentation where those are found. But for those of you that have not seen the MIPS quality measures yet, it's on the QPP website. They have a number of those, and they're also all listed in our portal. Data. We're to a little bit right now of understanding what it means when we say reporting on greater than 50% of your patient population. Here's something I used this metaphor the other day. If just calling you're a solo provider, you're going to report on more than 50% of all patients for the 6 measures, each of the 6 measures that you choose on the reporting period. So if you have, let's say you pick measure number 1 and you have 4 patients that you saw in the 90 days, you're going to report on at least 201 of those patient encounters. What I was saying before is, while CMS doesn't want you to cherry pick, we recognize the fact that people are getting their best 201 patients. The idea is if you're fairly consistent with your patients over 90 days, it should be that 200 of them are amazing and the other cluster of patients are absolutely terrible. I mean, that in of itself should tell you something about what's happening with your performance overall, so you want to pay attention to that. But at the end of the day, what you need to report to CMS is greater than 50% of your patient population for each measure. A couple of nuances here. Any that's on this call that's 2 providers under 1 TIN or more. So you have your TIN, your entity, your group practice name. If you have more than 2 providers, it's nowadays by CMS and by Patient 360 to report as a group practice. Reason is because it's much less cumbersome, and there's a lot of nuances that have changed with the program rules for MIPS. But understand that there's no more measures groups like there used to be in the past. So back in the day, people would say, you know what, it's going to be easier for me to report my providers under 1 TIN individually because we're going to use a measures group for each of them, and then we only have to report on 20 patient encounters. That doesn't exist anymore. The option of measures group is gone, so there's no reason why a group that more than 2 providers, 2 or more providers in a TIN would not report as a group. It's kind of like looking at are still using, you know, pigeons to send a note across the sky, or, you know, writing letters each month as opposed to using email. So it's still legal, like you could still do it. So technically there's people ask and say, well, I have 6 providers under my TIN, I'm just going to report them all individually. To which we say, so you like to still write letters and do things that are more cumbersome and that are going to take you more time. And they're like, no, never mind, we'll report as a group. So again, it's legal, but it doesn't make a lot of logical sense. Any groups really, I think if you have 2 or more providers, to not report as a group practice. And what that allows you to do is report still on greater than 50% of the patients, but you're going to take your 6 measures and you're going to look at patients within the 6 measures, report on greater than 50% of those patients for those measures. And then whatever providers happen to see those patients, it doesn't matter. So if you have a group of 10, and let's say you pick your 6 measures and you report and you find your 50% patient population for those measures that are the best encounters that you've got, and you submit those, but only say 3 out of the 8 providers happen to actually see those patients, that doesn't matter. So there's no more 50% hold of it. It has to be at least your group of 10, it has to be at least 5 or 6 providers that saw those patients. That doesn't matter so much anymore for CMS. What they're looking at is the actual patient population that you submitted greater than 50%, that you've selected the 6 best measures for the pace that you're looking at. Another thing that is important to note as well, this changed, so we're going to verbally tell you what the rule is, and then we're also going to tell you what we have verbally been told by CMS. You're supposed to report on greater than 50% of all of your patients. In the past, old QRS program, it was greater than 50% of your Medicare Part B fee-for-service patients only. A lot of providers complained about that and said, well, I don't treat my Medicare patients any different than any of my other patients, so why can't we just report all of our patients? So CMS did change that rule. So now it's you report on 50%, whether you're an individual provider or a group practice, 50% of all of your patients, regardless of what insurance they're on or whatever, whether Medicare or not, just 50% of all your patients for those measures. CMS has told us, but if you were to go in and do an audit, how would you know that it's 50% of all patients? Really, all you can check for is the Medicare Part B. Isn't that correct? That is correct. So they have verbally explained the program rule is, in the spirit of the program, submit greater than 50% of your patients. However, we have been verbally told that in the event of an audit, which, of course, how can CMS go in and look at other patients' details and data? They can only look at the Medicare Part B and ensure that you've reported on greater than the 50% of your Medicare Part B patients. So that's a nuance to distinguish. We encourage everyone to report on greater than 50% of all of the patients. We're also providing you with a translation of what the program rules say in writing versus what would happen in the event of an audit. Do you have anything else to add about that?
These people are very nervous because it's federal, but really very rarely have found problems. you need to make sure that if you're going to be claiming that something was done, and this sounds really stupid to say out loud, it needs to be in the medical record. And if it's a longitudinal component of the medical record, it just needs to be referenced in a note that's in the reporting year, preferably the one that you designated a date of service that had the CPT and ICD combination for the measure that you're wishing to use. So the audits are really more there that we as a registry, as a quality clinical data registry, can show CMS that we are keeping tabs. We do audit a little higher than what Medicare requires just to prove that we're taking this seriously. And I can only think of one instance in the last decade that we've been doing this work that we've really had an issue.
Yeah, we don't want to scare you by saying the word audit to scare you, but we just wanted to mention that there's certain things that are put in writing for program policy with CMS that people get up on a lot. And we try to say, look, report on greater than 50% of all your patients. Some folks have things coded in a certain way. At least make sure at the very least you're reporting on greater than 50% of all your Medicare Part B patients, at the very least. So that's something that's an important nuance to just let you know about. Do you have any questions about, because this comes up a lot in the chat box, if you want to ask more questions about practice reporting versus reporting. One thing, if you're a solo provider, obviously going to report under your unique individual NPI-TIN, your unique individual NPI-TIN. Nowadays, if you're 2 or more providers under one TIN, it's absolutely less burdensome. It makes a whole lot more sense for you to report as a group practice. For those providers that might not utilize those measures, might not be performing that well, it's the other providers in the practice, other patients that we're seeing for the measure that are scoring well and performing well that are going to basically carry the entire practice. So the results that you would get as a group avoids the payment adjustment in the group, based on how the group performs. But group might only be performing well based on a certain number of really good encounters. So those encounters that have been submitted for the performance period, if you're choosing 90 days, if they're stellar and they're great, representative of the entire group, but yet you're going to avoid the payment adjustment and receive a potential bonus for those particular results for the entire group. Does that make sense to everyone? And Doug, did you want to chime in anything else on that?
No, I think it will.
Great.
So this is Tara. We have Rochelle asking in the chat box if you still report on 50% of MCR patients. As a group practice, the rule is still 50%. It's always 50%, whether you're individual provider reporting or whether you're a group practice reporting. And if you're reporting as a group, break this down for people. If you have a group of 5 providers, you're on greater than 50% of the patients seen for each measure. So greater encounters for each measure. Not for the 5 providers, just for the group. If you're reporting as an individual, you're also on greater than 50% of the encounters of the patients. So it is a lot easier to report as a group. And yes, to answer your question, if you're reporting as a group, you're looking at, for each measure, reporting on greater than 50% of the patients seen during that period for that measure. Does that clarify? All patients.
All patients, yes. That's written in the final rule.
It's a little confusing because it was prior to this year, it was only Medicare patients, and now it's everybody. You can pick self-pays, you can pick private pays, you can pick Medicaid, you can pick Medicare. You could even add workers' comp in there if you wanted to, if they're related. I mean, anybody who you see is a potential eligible patient. Yep.
And for most folks, that has actually been an adjustment to the rule, to the CMS rule that they've appreciated, because of exactly what I said before, when providers were complaining and when they made adjustments to the final rule. We do the same thing for all of our patients. So can we just please look at this measure and across all patients, because then we're looking at change in outcomes and improvement and all this other stuff for everyone, not just for Medicare patients. For some people, they had to change coding in a certain way. So it depends on what you're doing behind the scenes, but it is written in the final rule just so everyone knows. Standard written CMS policy for the 2017 MIPS is that you do report on 50%, greater than 50% of all of your patients for each measure. This is pretty simple. As I said before, regardless of which
pace you choose, even if you end up only doing the beginner one, if you're doing the 90-day, whatever, just by participating in 2017, you're going to avoid a downward 4% payment adjustment. If you use the 90-day reporting option and or full year and CDR, you'll end up with a neutral adjustment, so you'll avoid the 4%, or a potential positive adjustment. Now, say about the algorithms that CMS runs behind the scenes. They don't even know. In our portal is we assign points, so we do let you know. We do have comparisons in our software that say to you, okay, I've submitted these measures, how performing, and how performing against the national benchmark. So say the national benchmark for a particular measure, in order to get 10 points for that measure, you have to be scoring 95%. So we're those algorithms for you and giving you an estimate of how many points you're receiving for each measure. Estimate to what CMS is running, but we can't then tell you what that's going to equate to in terms of dollars, because CMS can't even do that. They have to wait for everyone's data to come in for 2017 to who has participated in the program and who hasn't, and then who's performed well, who hasn't, and then all the algorithms get run about who gets what for money. I know that's a really simplified way of saying it, but it's simple about what they're running behind the scenes, and they keep it so covered that we don't really know either. So we can't tell you in our portal, oh, you're getting this many points. You're making 70 points, so that means you're going to earn an extra this amount of money. We can actually translate the dollars for you. No one can, and if anybody can, then they must be Houdini, because CMS themselves aren't even doing that. So that's something to be aware of. But we give estimates in our portal of how many points we think that you're going to be achieving based on how you're comparing to the national benchmarks. And so you can get up to, by the time 2019 rolls around, because everybody on this call probably knows it's all delayed, so you're getting your adjustment until 2019. So you're participating here in 2017, and the payment adjustment, avoiding the downward 4% payment adjustment, happens in 2019, or your bonus would happen in 2019. Doug, anything else to add about how I explain the bonus? Because I know I just like to try to make it easy when we're talking about dollars and cents.
No, it's still a bit of a crystal ball, because although they tell us that there's going to be this super high bonus, I found what the government considers super high and what I consider super high to be congruent. So we estimate that it'll be above 10-20%, but we don't actually, or above 10%, maybe as high as 20%, but we don't really know. That's speculation. We just know that it should be considerably higher than it currently is. And we're trying to do our best to help our clients be eligible for that, whatever that number will be. I try to explain it to folks, from the CLO guys, is, well, we talked about a 2002 fee schedule. If you get no right now and you just remain budget neutral, because you'll be paid at a 2002 fee schedule at that point, is to bring you up to a 2004, maybe a 2005 fee schedule. So not a ton better, but I've shaved off a few more years to become more contemporary in what the feds are paying us.
Yeah, gosh, they're so behind in everything. Anyway, we don't have a lot of time left, and I want to leave a couple minutes for Ray to go through some new interface features in our portal, but I wanted everyone to see some quick numbers. If you're a provider on this call, just to see the numbers in writing, like participating in the program, just by participating at all, what you're avoiding in payment adjustment in 2019 based on your size, and we just did some estimates here of, if you're billing in Medicare Part B, your allowable charges say are $600,000, right? For a group of 4 providers, you're avoiding a downward 4% payment adjustment just by participating in the program, regardless of which pace you choose. And then, of course, you do choose the potential B-day or full year pace, or QCDR, what you can potentially gain in bonus. On top of avoiding the negative payment adjustment, which means you're essentially staying neutral, what you could actually gain. So take a look at these numbers. You can crunch your numbers if you look at last year, what you may have billed in allowable charges to kind of take that number and look at multiplying by upward or downward 4%, and that'll kind of give you a sense of what you stand to gain or lose. And again, one, as we sort of wrap up the thinking of how we're be thinking about the program, even though it's not perfect, let me tell you, we all can appreciate the fact that this program was launched by CMS before they actually had the complete guts of it and mechanics of the program, before software was completely developed. I mean, it really, is what it is. There's not much we can do about the fact that the government's always behind. But what we can do is try to keep a half-glass-full attitude about it and say, look, let's get rid of the program and try to improve our clinical behavior and outcomes. There is a potential to earn bonus if we're trying to, play the game the right way. We can improve, care based on our performance data. We can try to work with that. So look at the analytics in the Patient 360 portal over time, see what we're doing right or wrong, and try to make those adjustments. And then, of course, being on these calls, being a part of this, because initially there isn't going to be a test pace in 90 days. Like I said, 2018, you've got to participate fully or you're going to lose the 4% anyway, which totally sucks. So at least if you're doing it now this year, even if you're doing it only at the pick your pace or 90 day, you'll understand the 3 categories. You'll have some of the basic mechanics of what goes on in this program. So next year, when you have to do it at full pace to avoid the penalty, at least you'll have some sense of what's going on. So that's a little bit of a half glass full. And I offer all the registry measures, all the MIPS measures. We have 7 of our own QCDR homegrown measures that you can use. We have all cases and categories, and we do measure selector in our portal. Plus, you can have clinical conversations with Doug about various measures that you've selected as well. We have data entry. There's a one at the end to submit to CMS. We have analytics tools that show you, and Ray DeFrio is going to show you what we've got in store. Briefly, just some exciting new features for the portal and for what we're going to be doing with dashboards so that you can understand more about your outcomes and how you're performing. This is available on our website, but again, we have access to all of these registry measures. We provide real-time feedback now so you can actually see through graphs and pivot tables how you're actually performing within your group. So providers are performing within your group and then how you're performing against the national benchmarks. You're visiting our website so that you can figure out which pace to do and how to be working with us. With Ray D'Onofrio at our new P360 user interface. What's upcoming in the next 10 minutes, we're just going to give you a brief overview of some things that are changing and things that we're excited about and being able to show you how you're performing. And Tamara, if you can just go ahead and pass the ball to Ray, that's fantastic. He'll share some of what he's been working on. And on my screen. There. And I pass the ball. There we go.
I'm trying to pass it to that.
Ray, and then if you just want to click on share your screen, we'll take a look at what you've got in store.
I am trying to do that right now, and I am not able to share it yet.
Yeah, it should be coming your way.
Okay. Let me get this presentation started up here for folks. While I'm doing that, quick little bit on myself. I am relatively new to Patient 360. I have, hate to admit, almost 30 years now in healthcare technology. Most recently, I was working on meaningful use products, and we're supporting 1,000 physicians. So, real quick here, so we're going to give you a sneak peek at the next generation portal. I'm just going to go through this pretty fast. What we're trying to do is improve the overall experience of the Patient 360 portal. As it's been discussed here, QPP and improving outcomes should be exactly the same thing. They're not quite. There's some opportunities under QPP MIPS to improve your scores. The thing that will be seen in the portal is that we're going to try and have better separation of administration, data acquisition, monitoring and manage, and performance analytics. Patient 360 goals are really to reduce the burden as well as encourage physician use. One of the things that we saw in meaningful use is that as physicians got engaged, scores went up. They better understood what they could do to change things. We want to improve our EHR interoperability and improve with some more powerful analytics. What QPP Bliss for us, at some point in time, we'd like to get to a point where you push a button, our data is analyzed, and the best possible reporting strategy is provided. We're not there but that's sort of to give you an idea of what's in our mind from a QPP perspective. That's where we'd like to get to. So today, we're just going to talk a little bit about some improvements for the user interface. So the thing we want to do is look at when we sign in. So we've got Dr. Joe Early here. He's going to sign in. What we want to do is bring people directly to a dashboard. That dashboard is going to basically break down like QPP does. You have your composite score and then the components of it. In the future, obviously, costs will be on here as well, too. We have a couple different components of the numbers that you're seeing here, and what we're trying to do is show people their current, the max, and the category max. Now, your max and your category max may not always be the same thing. You may not be having enough measures under quality to actually get to the full 60 points that you can get out of the quality measures. We also would like to, again, encourage the physicians to come in. So here we have Dr. Joe Early. So in this case, Joe signed in. He's seeing his measures as compared to his group. We could also do comparisons to a benchmark or other group of physicians, whatever makes sense. If you're coming in as an administrator and you're not a physician, what would you want to see? You'd really just see the group scores, and it would be a little bit more simpler. But the same idea, how's your group doing? What is the group's maximum score? And what's the category maximum? So you may not always see this by percentage. It's possible that there could be other views. Again, I talked about potentially looking at it compared to benchmarks, but maybe you want to see it by score. Now we can see more relative to score. We have your base scores set up. Down here we see in the SCI, maybe the group hasn't completed for some reason their base, and they're not getting any points for that, whereas Dr. Joe has actually completed his base, and he'll actually get the points for that. I show the same amount of measures here, but that's not always true. Because of the 50% and the way a group works, it's very possible that a single physician may not be contributing to every single measure that the group is reporting on. So you look at this and you say, this looks great, so what's going on? So what you would do is you just click into your score here and say, okay, here's a list of what's going on with our quality measures. I randomly pick some, not the most common ones, but we can hear that Dr. Joe isn't doing too well on measure 86. Well, the first thing you may want to know is what was that? So we're going to make it really easy just to take a quick look and understand what measure all about, what are the deciles, how do you have to be doing, give you some general information. If you want to take a look at this and drill in and say, okay, how is Dr. Early doing? Just click on his information, and here you see the patients that have actually, the encounters that have contributed to that score. Hello?
I hear music.
I do too.
Very soothing. Very soothing, but we got to mute it out. QPP music.
Absolutely. So as you can see here, the encounters would be able to click into if that data is there. If the group, what it is, you do see the same screen, but you'd see all the providers in the group that participated into that score. Let me go back. Let's just say you're looking at groups. What would that give you? So you would click into your group, and what you actually see is all the physicians for the group that contributed to that measure, and then you'd have some abilities to sort and filter on which physicians. So maybe in this case, we sorted it score high to low, and then you can do the same thing. You could click into each physician just like we did previously, or you would be able to click into the actual information. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of the overall of the going with the new dashboard and new initial interface. If you've got any thoughts or ideas, by all means, I encourage you to get back to Patient 360, but this is just a little piece of what we're working on. We hope to be doing some on interoperability and figuring out how to do a better job getting straight into the EHRs and getting the data out of there, so making the whole data loading process a whole lot easier, and then really getting into some improved analytics. So you'll have an ability to see more about how you're moving the bar on your outcomes. So
thanks so much, Ray.
Yep.
Very cool to get some insight onto what we have to look forward to with the Patient 360 portal. Currently, we do have all of the analytics available. They just look a little bit different, and they're harder to analyze from the user interface perspective. So we're really hoping that as we continue to, the logic is already built in the background, but make user interface easier for all of you who are currently already working with us, and folks that are new to come, that this is some of the user interface that you'll see and that you'll be working with. So I know we have to wrap things up because we are at time, but I do ask if anybody has any quick questions here for the chat box. If not, and you have some questions that you weren't able to ask in the chat box, please feel free. I know most of you have my email address. You can also contact Heather and or Tamara or info@patient360 email address. And then I strongly recommend having a look at the Patient 360 website now. If you're interested in doing the MIPS for beginner, you can go ahead and get that started. For folks who want to do the beginner pace, it won't take you more than 20 minutes to just pick your encounter, choose your measure, enter the data, and be done with it. For those that are doing 90 days after listening today, I certainly recommend here in August that you start to get things rolling so that you have more 90 days to pick from, so that you can actually pick your best of 90 days and submit data for that. So I'm thinking of that because I don't see anything else in the chat box, but we'll look forward to getting your emails and your feedback. We're also going to be sending you a survey. SurveyMonkey, we very much appreciate your feedback. We'll keep it short and sweet because we know that everyone's time is valuable, but we do want feedback on your thoughts and ideas about this session. If you walked off the call knowing what we talked about at the beginning in terms of goals and agenda, what the spirit of the program is, the overall program, and how to do 90-day reporting. So we want to make sure that you walked off the call knowing a little bit more about that. Thanks so much for joining Patient 360 today, and we'll look forward to receiving your emails, and we'll be sending you a survey out shortly. Take care.